The Brian Crabtree Show on Demand is brought to you by Snelling's Walters Insurance. More than an advisor, an advocate. SnellingsWalters.com. The Brian Crabtree Show, live in Atlanta, afternoon starting at 4 on Biz 1190, Biz1190.com, and the Biz 1190 mobile app. The Brian Crabtree Show.
You are twisted, you hear me? You are screwed up in the head.
What we're going for is serious, insightful, thought-provoking radio journalism.
Can you handle it?
Well, we can't say we haven't been warned.
Brian Crabtree. The Brian Crabtree Show.
All right, another hour of the Brian Crabtree Show forthcoming. We'll get into the Roy Moore allegations. The Senate Republican candidate for Alabama from the Washington Compost, they've just annihilated him with 4 underage girls saying, well, actually 2 of them were underage, but we'll break that down. 4 girls saying that he, at 30-something years old, pursued them for sexual advances. And now many Republicans even calling for him to resign. This is to replace Jeff Sessions, seat vacated for his appointment as Attorney General. Maybe I'll just put Jeff Sessions back in the seat and just be done with it. Find a new AG that's going to go put crooked Hillary in jail. How about that? Just give Jeff Sessions his seat back and be done with it. I don't think it works that way. We'll get into that bottom of the hour. Plus, coming up, Mark Cuban. He's considering running for president as a Republican, but will he? That in a couple of moments. First, I want to ask a question about health insurance. My next guest, Mike Iverson. SnellingsWalters.com insurance, frequent guest on our show. Why can't I shop for doctors and procedures and pharmaceuticals? I want to build up to this question and just get the best deal. Why is it that we as consumers aren't empowered? We're going to get to that in a second. Mike, good to have you.
Brian, another great day in Atlanta.
So you and I were talking off the air about just the general cost of health insurance. We had an interview a couple of days ago, and we got into the fact that the average consumer cannot figure out how to determine what the cost of something is, on or off insurance. It's just you ask the doctor's office, what does this cost? They go, I don't know. And you said, that we are a country full of consumers, and all of a sudden, the only thing we won't consume as consumers is health insurance. We'll go beat each other up, trample over people to get a Black Friday television for $100 off, but we won't beat up, so to speak, the health insurance or health care industry to save a few $1,000s on our coverage, on our cost. And you said, well, the average doctor doesn't really know what the costs are, and if they did, they'd act differently. Speak to that for a second. Well, how is it a doctor can't know the cost of the performances and services they're providing?
Well, I think we have to look back at a doctor's office. How many of your listeners today sit in a doctor's office and can remember 20 years ago when you would go in and you'd have a chat with your doctor? You'd not only talk about your condition, you'd talk about life. And you had a fairly long appointment with the doctor, and now you have a feeling of a little bit of a turnstile. You know that they're burning and turning because they need to get through as many patients as possible in order for their business model to work. And what's become inherently more difficult is the whole screening of your health insurance. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia had 72 plans filed in the state of Georgia, and that's not including their self-insured clients who could have all sorts of different designs than whatever Blue Cross traditionally offers. We can go by carrier by carrier by carrier. The whole industry, there is a certain complexity to it, and the thought that a doctor is doing his best or her best to keep up with all the paperwork that they need to file for Medicare and for every other reimbursement that could happen in the United States, as well as health insurance, they don't know. They don't have time to look at your health plan and your prescription drug coverage and then to say, okay, which retailer are you buying the drug from, to know whether this is the most cost-effective drug or prescription for you when there is an equal substitute.
Yeah, because it's gotten so convoluted. But let me ask you a question, because my perception was when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, doctors were rich then. They made a lot of money, and they were giving very detailed personal service, as you just described, to people. Now it's basically it's like a buffet. You get in line and move quickly. At the doctor's office, because they have a different business model, they're still making about, in terms of per capita income, and inflation, they're still making a lot of money. What happened to where they now have to see so many more patients? What was the turning point? At what point did it change from where they could see 10 or 15 patients a day to where they had to run 40 or 50 through? And why?
Well, I think the tip of the spear on this, years ago was the invention of the HMO, right? A health managed organization that essentially you bought insurance from, and it would be lower cost. Well, the reason that they drove down costs is they decided to have fewer doctors, limit your choices, and then have those doctors see more patients throughout the day. So a lot of it is market based. I mean, there's a lot of market pressure. Add back a lot of the federal requirements, who examine how doctors keep track of paperwork, a host of other things, rather than invest in time with patients. That money has been spent on software, on people to program things in, to run codes for clearances, on documenting paperwork for the federal government and reimbursements. I mean, there's a lot of expense that was back office expense and is today back office expense that we don't even see as the consumer.
That's a good point.
Back in the early days,
regulation.
Yeah, back in the early days was a doctor, a nurse, and a receptionist.
And a lot of those doctors have now gotten shoved into selling their practices to big conglomerates who buy up doctors' practices, and then you have the corporate overhead and the private jets and all of the what they call allocation, corporate allocation to each office. So where it used to be, you just had the doctor, the nurse, and the receptionist. Now you've got the doctor, the nurse, the receptionist, 3 insurance compliance officers, a corporate liaison, et cetera, and that then triples or quadruples the number of patients you've got to see. But here's a more simple question about health insurance, Mike. Mike Iverson with us, SnellingsWalters.com Insurance here in Atlanta. Mike, when it comes to setting the prices, and I understand it, but I don't. Why can't a doctor just say a visit's $135? That's what it costs, and it's not like, well, if it's cash, it's $75 or $200. If it's Blue Cross, it's $93. If it's Ambetter, it's $104. How is it that they have no control or knowledge of their own pricing? I don't understand why the insurance companies are able to have so much power legally over that.
Yeah. So the insurance company, in fairness to the insurance companies, they turn around and go to a doctor and say, we've got 5,000 people within 10 miles of your office. If you can give us this pricing, we will promote you as a doctor and try to drive patients to your practice. So they set up a contract of services, and they map out every service that doctor could ever perform, and they come to agreed upon pricing. It helps Blue Cross Blue Shield control their prices to the doctor. He or she gains access to patients that may be in that area, and so there's that big exchange.
Now, are the doctors
from a business?
Are the doctors doing this, Mike? Are they doing it one by one with the insurance companies themselves, or are they going through some sort of middleman broker who sets it up for them and just here's what you get with Ambetter, here's what you get with Blue Cross, here's what you get with Kaiser Permanente? The doctors aren't going through this, are they? They've got somebody doing it in the middle for them, right?
Well, the answer is depends. Some practices are large enough that they'll have somebody do some internal analysis. Sometimes doctors can't get the leverage with health insurance carriers, and they're worried about protecting their margins, and that's what some of the big hospitals and the big names offer and are selling to them, that we're going to help protect your practice. Now, if we go all the way back to the inception of the Affordable Care Act, which if the United States is a believer in small business, my big question is, how was the Affordable Care Act designed in order to support small business? The declaration was, we're going to choose 5 carriers within any state for an exchange. Well, did they think they were going to choose the 5 smallest? Because they would want a standardization of contract. No, those big carriers who were able to negotiate the biggest discounts took over the exchanges, and now they're vacating those exchanges.
Those are the big guys.
The government gets involved. The government drives up the size of the companies that they deal with. There's never been a time that I've seen in government history where we federalize something and it's involved finding smaller contractors than it was using before. It's always big.
Yeah, it's always the big guys, because in order to comply with federal government contract and the General Services Administration, whether you're getting a contract from the government or beside the government because of the government, you have to have almost an army of people that have been inside the government to coach you on how to get it, and it's very expensive. It's the same in the real estate business. I've seen it. To get a government Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or FHA HUD contract as a real estate broker, you either have to have been in that space, or you have to have somebody that you hire that's been inside the government to coach you through how to put all the pegs in the right holes. Otherwise, you can't ever get it. It's very difficult for small businesses to get business from the government because there's so many complex and complicated, illogical things that you have to think through and apply to get it. So before we run out of time, Mike Iverson with us, SnellingsWalters.com. We've talked in the past about an insurance industry, especially the kind of insurance that you do, is indicative of the mood in the economy. We've had some hurricanes. It's been very devastating to Texas, Louisiana, Florida. You would presume that would have at least taken a third quarter hit on the country. It may have, but we still had a very strong GDP number, 3% coming out last week. I would presume as we normalize those states that have been highly affected, that then will create a bump even higher potentially. But what are you seeing in the insurance markets that would indicate the economy is either flat, up, or down as we head into the fourth quarter? What does it look like?
Yeah. So two things. One, I want to backstep. I'm going to answer that question specifically, but I want to give everybody out there really a strong takeaway point on healthcare. Take control of your spend. So when you're in a doctor's office and you have concerns about the cost of a prescription, or you go to Rite Aid to have that prescription filled and you find that it's astronomical, it's okay to call your doctor's office back and just ask him or her one more time if this is the best drug, because here's what the cost is to you. They may have ideas that are very equal substitutes, and there are a host of drugs out there right now that are super expensive that are designed to be a one-pill solution instead of taking two separate pills. So take control of your healthcare spend.
Amen.
And now to speak to the economy, Brian, here's the good news. I mean, on the commercial side of our firm, we watch audits. So most commercial insurance policies are based on sales or payroll. And so we are seeing, in years past, we would see audits. So they would come out and at the end of the year say, oh, your payroll was lower than what was projected, and they would return premiums. We're seeing increased audit. We're seeing companies growing, beating what their goal was at the beginning of the year, and starting to see some growth. And we're actually seeing the return of a little bit of margin. So anybody who wants to drive through downtown Atlanta right now, how many lifts and how many skyscrapers do you see actually being
there's
built?
Quite a few.
Right?
Just
cranes in the sky. Cranes are always the leading edge.
That's true.
There's a lot of cranes up right now.
Now, and just for the audience that doesn't understand, what you're talking about is the fact that maybe an employer that you work with for their insurance package has workman's comp in their insurance plans. Most all would have that. And they estimate the payroll and which services and employee services they're going to hire for the year. Maybe it's $1 million a year in payroll, and they're an office environment. And at the end of the year, they've paid workman's comp on $1 million of payroll, but they turned out they had to hire extra people because business was better than expected. So they ended up with $1.2 million in payroll instead. And so your insurance group would, as all insurance works, the workman's comp would audit them, say, well, wait a minute, you paid extra $200,000. You owe us a little extra premium. And that to you, and it's true, is indicative of a growing economy when you start to see that happening, not just at one or two isolated employers, but at many or most of them. Correct? Yep.
Correct. And we also see it in our construction practice. We see it in bonds and the growth of bonded jobs. We're seeing upticks. I'm very optimistic about what the future holds. Very optimistic. We see it in manufacturing. A bunch of our manufacturers, we've got 2 or 3 that were thinking about selling last year that decided instead of selling that they were going to reinvest in their own expansion because they believed there was a better future for them.
Do you believe that in manufacturing that they are getting back toward capacity yet? Do you have any sense of what, capacity, when an economy's booming, you're near 100%, you have a shortage of goods. Are we getting into that territory yet, or do we still have some way to go in your estimation?
I feel that we've got a long way to go to capacity. I mean, ever since 2007, we have been smashed. The auto industry isn't what it could be yet. nearly every industry still has capacity, and the question is, are they running the second and third shifts at their production facilities? A lot of them still aren't running third shifts. There's still capacity.
But some are running second shifts now that weren't for a long time running anything but a first shift. So that's a good. So we could be on a lengthy economic expansion here if nothing derails us. That's some good news. Mike Iverson, SnellingsWalters.com is the website. Snellings Walters Insurance here in Atlanta. Always great to have you on. We learn a lot. Mike, the phone number?
770-396-9600.
And again, online, SnellingsWalters.com.
The Brian Crabtree Show on demand is brought to you by Snellings Walters Insurance. More than an advisor, an advocate. SnellingsWalters.com. The Brian Crabtree Show, live in Atlanta, afternoon starting at 4 on Viz 1190, Viz1190.com, and the Viz 1190 mobile app.